Welcome back to the 2022 Resourcing Conference. We are up to start with the session 2, a new topic. We have 2.5 hours of intense inputs and discussion ahead of us. Session 2 is on a different aspect. It will look at a common agenda, at the possibility to align EU and Latin American visions for sustainable and responsible sourcing of minerals. And to do so, we again invited an expert moderator to lead through the following sessions, which is Emanuele Di Francesco. Very warm welcome to him. He's a communications expert with several years of experience in stakeholder engagement, partnerships development, and event moderation in the field of sustainability. And in his current position at Communications and Events Manager at the World Resources Forum Association, he has been involved in the topic of sustainable mineral resourcing, resources, through international projects and the flagship World Resources Forum conference. And he says that thanks to the resourcing project, he has been able to dive into the concept of responsible sourcing in Latin America and EU-Latin American relationships for sustainable mineral value chain. And this is what he would like to share with you now. Hello, Emanuele.
Hi, Ursula. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone, and thanks a lot for the kind introduction. And welcome to the second session of the Resourcing 2022 virtual conference. As Ursula just mentioned, we will touch upon a slightly different topic that one Patrick session just before and talked about. In this session, we are dealing with the cooperation between EU and Latin America to actually align on a vision of responsible sourcing and how this could be implemented in action. We are in an age which is not similar to the past, where there was a gold rush. We are in a sort of mineral rush right now, where everybody is becoming aware of the need for mineral and metals for building the future that we want to build, the future that many countries and companies are putting down in their commitments and roadmaps. This is a future in which minerals and metals will be at the core of production and consumption systems. And there is a lot of stress, taking again the wording from the session before, about how to ensure that the supply of these mineral and metals is met so that the production plans can go accordingly, according to the plans. On the other end, the responsible sourcing of minerals and metals has to play a key role in this picture, because otherwise we run the risk of falling in a sort of paradox. If on one hand, we want to use minerals and metals to move towards a sustainable society, if these minerals and metals are not sourced sustainably, what kind of sustainability are we actually pursuing, if it is sustainability at all? Finally, in terms of providing a very short introduction about the topic of today, the frame, I think, is quite clear. In this landscape of several interests and several parties interested in securing this mineral, we have two main counterparts. On one side, mineral-rich countries, which are those countries who are producing minerals, so are sourcing, are mining minerals, and are exporting them. For these countries where Latin American countries, many Latin American countries fall in, mineral resources have a strong weight on GDP and also on plans for sustainable development. On the other hand, there are countries which are, so to say, poor in mineral resources. And here we have the EU countries. And for EU countries, the main objective is to be able to secure through partnerships in trade, in investments, those minerals from partner countries. So today we will have both of these partners on the table. On one side, the EU, on the other side, Latin America. And we will try to discuss both about visions of responsible sourcing, but also concrete actions for enabling these visions. Finally, this session is a sort of follow-up from the Global Advocacy Forum, which is an initiative of the Resourcing Project, where we are traveling around the world, specifically in 3 regions, Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, to listen to local stakeholders, to hear from them what is their conception of responsible sourcing. We have this word a lot in our mouth in the consortium, But it's sometimes maybe neglected the fact that responsible sourcing might mean very different things to different people depending on the context in which they are. For today's session, we will keep you company for 1 hour and a half. I will have on my side 4 expert speakers, both from the European Union and Latin America. Let me quickly introduce all of them before starting with the actual session. We have Daniel Kramer. Daniel Kramer is a lawyer and economist by formation. He joined the European Court of Justice in 2004. Then he moved to the European Commission, where he worked in different areas such as taxation, climate change, international markets and services, trade and sustainable development, before spending 4 years in the EU delegation in Kiev, Ukraine, dealing with trade relations. He now got back to Brussels in September in the European Commission, DigiTrade, dealing with raw materials and being responsible for Latin America. So clearly, Daniel will provide us with a perspective of European trade towards and with Latin American countries. Very much welcome to Daniel. Then we have Claudia Peña from Chile, who is the Director of Sustainability at Dairy Research and Technology, and she's member of the Technical Committee of the International EPD System, where she's also co-director of the Hub EPD Latin America. Claudia is also a member of the Steering Committee of the Life Cycle Initiative, which is hosted by UNEP, and she's worked on the development on SDG indicators for the Chilean Ministry of the Environment and for the Ministry of Culture and Arts. Claudia, very warm welcome to you as well. Then we have Rafael Benque, who is the CEO and founder of Proactiva Results, a South American consultancy specialized in risk management and performance in ESG, business rights and human rights. Of course, always in the overall area of sustainability, where he has been advising several large international corporations. He's a recognized leader in sustainable development, international investments, and natural resources. He has been a protagonist in world-known cases related to human rights, such as with the Aboriginals in New Caledonia, or also with land use rights in Canada, Amazon, Guinea, Conakry, and Mozambique. Rafael is an executive with more than 2 decades of international experience, having held high-level positions, amongst others, at Vale and at the Brazil's Ministry of Development. And finally, we have Dr. Ana Bastida, Ana Elizabeth Bastida, who is an internationally recognized expert on the law, policy, governance, and international cooperation concerning mining and minerals. Her focusing on the intersection of resources law with the global economy, investment, environmental, and human rights law. Amongst others, she is the author of The Law and Governance of Mining and Minerals, A Global Perspective, which was published in 2020. Which aims at mapping the sources and developing a framework for the understanding of this field of study and practice. She is currently a senior lecturer at the University of Dundee and acts as an expert advisor to various governments and organizations. Very welcome, warm welcome to Rafael and Elizabeth as well. The session today for the next 1.5 hours will be divided in 2 main parts. In the first part, we will have 2 expert presentations, 2 sort of input presentations from Claudia and Daniel, which will provide us a perspective from Latin America and a perspective from Europe, which will be followed by a panel debate with all the 4 speakers. Before giving the floor to Claudia first and Daniel immediately after, I would like just to remind everyone that your questions are most welcome. We will definitely take them up during the panel debate and actually answer them live. It will help me in my job as moderator, also in making it a little bit easy in case I run out of questions. So please feel free to shoot your questions in the chat. We, of course, particularly like critical, engaging questions, and then I'll be happy to direct them to the speakers. In case you have one specific speaker in mind for your questions, for instance, related to one of the presentations, please indicate that as well in the Q&A function. That's all for a start. We will go through several topics after, but for now, I think let's dive into the topic immediately, and I would like to invite Claudia to join me and go on with her presentation. Claudia, please, the floor, or to better say, the screen is yours.
Well, Emmanuel, already present me, I just want to highlight that I also worked in the Chilean Research Center for Mining and Metallurgy for about 25 years. So it's the subject focus now, which I really understand. I want to answer this two kind of question. What is responsible source for a country like Chile, which is producer country and producing mining country, and also emerging country, and what we will expect from purchasing parts such as European Union. Please, the next one. First, I want also to talk about the concept of criticality, which appears some years ago when it's obvious that supply and demand has some imbalance worldwide related to metals and metalloids, which are critical for modern society. There are sporadic shortages due that there is a problem of geopolitical distribution worldwide. Primary resource that in some countries, for instance, in China, are rare earth materials. Tom Gradle, I want to quote him as he also worked for the International Resource Panel, 2008, more or less. And he developed this nice 3D equation, this index, which of course includes these geopolitical elements such as risk, supply risk and vulnerability of supply restrictions, but also environmental implication. This paper was published in 2015, and I will highlight how this concept evolved a little bit also in time. Please, next one, please. The criticality from there start to appear other papers, 2019, 2020. We also, for us, was a very important issue when the European Union published this very important memo in 2011 with the 14 raw material highlighting the problem of the country like us are rising environmental barrier to produce. So we start to thinking about what is criticality for us. So critical raw materials, I think, are some issues that already were there related to criticality. That is, these metals and metalloids are used in little amount, but also has problem with viable substitutes, and have some significant in the economic strategy for countries or for regions. And other things start to appear, like health and steel, that that expand this view of critical materials. In fact, countries such as Canada include in this list of their critical materials also copper, zinc, and nickel, of course, lithium. Lithium is common for all, that are not in scarce quantity and are producing country. Please, the next one. So what means criticality for us? We have these special materials, mostly related, in case of Chile, to copper production. We have molybdenum, important amount of quantity, also germanium, gallium, antimonium, the platinum metal group, lithium and cobalt. But having them, that doesn't mean that we will have a high technology. So what we have to do with this reserve? What means, of course, we can commercialize them, we know. But is necessary to do it right now? What else we can do? So what is criticality for us? What this means? Please, the next one. The problem for emerging countries, producing countries, is that we are very focused on daily problems nowadays. Just what happened now, what are our problems? We are full of problems. So we see in news, in daily news, things like this, that this person from mining say, we are not taking advantage of the high price of lithium now. But for instance, we see in the White House in February this year, they expect that the lithium price could rise up to 4,000%, 4,000% the present price. So I think that the price cannot be the problem, the only thing we can analyze here. So criticality for us is, well, we have these nice resources, mostly related to copper, but we have also a huge amount of lithium, cobalt, and we need to include in the equations negotiation, probably things like offsetting programs, developing with a partner who will purchase our resources. We have to develop a nice program for a better world, and including in the equation those social, environmental, and economic implications. The equation, we are still in a very heavy and strong discussion inside the country. So we have in this dichotomy, selling critical raw material or preserve them for the future and see what happened. Please, the next one. Wow, something happened here. We start to see there's a lot of initiative worldwide, especially related to circular economy, that thinking in urban mining. But what happened with dissipation of this material in the technosphere? We know that probably we will need always some primary fresh material to enter also the technostructure. And so this is an opportunity for us, but we have to think also how we have to manage this global thing in terms of circularity as well. Please, next one. And circularity is part of our internal discussion, but also part of the global discussion. And this ISO TC323, which is developing the guidelines for circularity, have two very important things that they highlighted, that SDG and life cycle thinkings are considered overarching principle for measuring and assessing circularity. And this is a very good news for us. Please, next one. Because from the framework for assessing and measuring circularity, we need complementary methods, because circularity is so focused on economic things. So resource depletion, what is important for economy, but what happened with the rest of impact category that can be important for specific material products and also social things. So we need complementary method to really assess potential circularity solutions or strategies. Next one, please. And because we are talking about SDG and life cycle thinking, we have a common point with circularity, which is the responsible consumption and production. And it was highlighted also by the Life Cycle Initiative in this nice paper, position paper in 2021. Please, the next one. So we have this global thing. We have resources. We know we have to be careful and initiatives such as circular economy, and what would happen with the supply chain, and what will happen with our selling strategies. We have to have the whole picture in our mind. So we need tools, practical tools, and one of the tools is life cycle assessment, which is ISO. It's an ISO standard. And we have also social life cycle assessment, which is also an ISO standard, which is in progress now. So life cycle sustainability assessment will be a very good complementary methodology for circular economy strategies. And the way to communicate the results of a life cycle assessment is environmental product declaration, which is also an ISO 14025. Which now is extended also, is in the process to have also an FPD, an environmental product declaration for social impacts of the life cycle. Please, next one. And nice articles such as these from the Cement and Concrete Association will start to appear, which really tools like LCA and EPD are very practical because allow to take the best decisions in terms of environmental impacts and also in terms of sustainability. And we can really make a difference in how to purchase material and how to present them to the global trading networks and supply chains. So we can really make a difference with this kind of tool and really understand we are compliant with approved global standards, please. The next one. And other companies such as Enel or this electricity producing company in the north part of Chile are using also LCA and EPD as part of the circular economy programs to ensure that the suppliers and are involved in this circular economy program, and also the material and products we buy are also the best choice in terms of sustainability. The other one, please. But we have a specific impact category dependent of the material of products. And this is a nice thing that EPD, the ISO 14025 do, because we can relate it very well with this structure for the glossary for products of the United Nations, the Central Product Classification. The next one, please. So we can really see what are the range of impact category important for this category and present them, communicate in a certified way so you can make the best decision. Please, the next one. What is the attribute of Chile or another mining country? We have a lot of attributes as a mining country with a long tradition. And one of them, we know very well the market. We have a lot of human resources. We have research. We know very well the technology and how to trade, etc. But we have no experience at all in market of the scarce materials such as gallium and germanium. So this is something that we can learn from other countries as well. Please, the next one. So the point is what we can do. We have a lot of research. We can develop, use them to negotiate and develop high technology. We just can sell them, but sell in sustainability well, in line with the global standards and trends in sustainability for a better world. Please, the other. And we have, I will not deepen this list, but just to mention that this first list under discussion now, consider copper. We are the first copper reserve, and many of the metals that are also part of other list of critical materials, but also start to see things that normally are considered here as impurity of copper, such as antimony. Now we are reevaluated our tailings and so on. And for just one mining, we see we have 1.7 tons per year. But what happened also, we have to see that the way we are producing primary metals is the wrong way if we are thinking to recover this metal, because also these are dissipated through the process, because we are producing with a very old way of thinking. We need to rethink primary production as well. The next one. And I'm just coming to the end. So responsible sourcing is taking life cycle sustainability, life cycle thinking, sorry for the mistake there, and a sustainable development goal as overarching principle as well. We need to apply the world standards of ISO, such as life cycle assessment, such as the TC323, the of circular economy, and also the EPD for communicate and avoid greenwashing. And this is something important for suppliers as well as the part that is purchasing this valuable resource. We also have to include those sustainable finance indicators in our global perspective of how it will be reasonable to prospect as plans, our projects and designs, so on, to have the involvement of the necessary resources in our funds and planning and so on. Also, we need to include in the critical assessment, geopolitical analysis, commercial aspects, but also all probabilities of the commercialization with programs of green technology, offsetting, consider global trends in sustainability, and work for a better world, because we are a globalized world now. So our decision here will affect you and will affect other emerging countries as well. And I think this is all. The next one. Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Claudia, for this very interesting presentation, which I think provides already some key elements for the debate later on. And especially, we always used, of course, to talk about the infamous European Critical Raw Materials List, and also the Critical Raw Materials Act, which is being developed now, but for once is quite mindset changing to see how criticality as a concept might be applied in a different context, as in the case of Chile. So thank you very much for that, and we will come back to the details and some of the insights you provided later on. For now, I would like to go back to Europe from Latin America, and more precisely to Daniel for his presentation. So please, Daniel, the stage, or again, the screen is all yours.
So hello everybody. I was introduced, so I will not. I will go straight into the presentation. Next slide, please. First, I would like to very shortly mention the context, then go to talk about the EU's trade policy in general, and then dive deeper into the details of our free trade agreements, and with focus on sustainability and raw materials. Then see what partnerships we are building. These are based on legally non-binding MOUs, Memorandum of Understandings. Then I will talk about a little bit about our autonomous trade measures. And finally, I have a slide on the Critical Raw Materials Act that we are preparing. So the presentation will go from more general to more detailed, and maybe the hardcore part comes at the end. So I will go a bit quicker at the beginning. But let me just first, before starting in earnest, highlight that I am from DG Trade. So I look at the whole this whole topic from a trade angle. I have a lot of colleagues in the EU institutions dealing with raw materials. First, I should mention DG GROW. They look at the internal market aspects, and right now the big question is how to use more the resources within the EU. Then I have colleagues in INTPA who are dealing with this issue from a an international support perspective. So they are dealing with international projects. And then we have AIS, which is looking at it more from a geopolitical perspective. So my focus will be more from a trade perspective. So the context we have seen already in the previous presentation, that the focus on criticality and critical raw materials has started long ago in 2011. Then came the pandemic, which exposed the supply chain problems. And then came the war, more precisely the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And in the background of all this, you have the geopolitical tensions between US and China. So the conclusion is quite clear. We have to strengthen our relationships with the neighborhood and with areas like Africa, Latin America, and Asia, we, meaning the EU, and build, make sure that our sources are diversified. So that's a bit the context. Next slide, please. I will go quickly with the description of the EU trade policy, but you'll see that it matters because it is the contradiction or the several objectives at once that are basically the leitmotif of this whole event. It's how to secure the green and digital transition, and at the same time ensure our interests, the interests of the EU industry, and do all that while being sustainable and fair. Next slide, please. We have our mantra nowadays is open strategic autonomy. It's both a model and a mindset. It's can be defined as maximizing the EU's ability to make its own choices and shape the world around it through leadership and engagement, reflecting its strategic interests and values. It's showing strength through openness. It builds on multilateralism, but if we must, we have to act autonomously. So cooperate, be multilateral. The EU wants to remain multilateral, wants to cooperate, but when we must, we are ready to act autonomously. Next slide, please. These are the 6 critical areas identified for the medium term in the EU's general trade policy. You have the multilateral part, which is about the reform of the WTO. You have support the green transition and promote responsible and sustainable value chains, support the digital transition and trade in services, strengthen the EU's regulatory impact, and strengthen the EU's partnerships with neighboring enlargement countries and Africa. This is what I will develop in more details, the partnerships, because that's where the free trade agreements and partnerships come in. And finally, strengthen the EU's focus on the implementation of and enforcement of trade agreements. Next slide, please. So this is developing a bit the intention to be to have a much greener, basically the greenest EU trade policy ever. And here we have the same approaches. So you have the multilateral, the bilateral, and the autonomous. In multilaterally, we are advocating for climate and sustainable WTO initiatives. Bilaterally, we are seeking a commitment on climate neutrality from our main partners, from G20 members. In our free trade agreements, we expect the inclusion of trade and sustainable development chapters and platforms for cooperation on climate, biodiversity, circular economy, etc. One very important element is the Paris Agreement, without which we are not ready to sign any more FTAs, free trade agreements. And then you have the autonomous tools, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, which is, I think, quite famous or infamous by now, and the mandatory due diligence, forced labor and deforestation legislation. Due diligence was mentioned several times already during this conference or event. Next slide, please. And now I'm getting at the heart of my to the heart of my presentation. So we have quite a EU is a trading superpower that has a big system of agreements, trade agreements. It's the world's biggest network of trade agreements, 46 agreements with 78 countries. And you can see that Latin America is quite well covered. You have ongoing ratification with Mercosur, with Chile, and with Mexico. And you have, but we also have a few EBA or GSP, Generalized System of Preferences countries in the region. Next slide, please. So, what has changed in our approach to free trade agreements? On the one hand, we have, so this is the EU industry interest. It's we pay more attention to energy and raw materials, and in our most recent agreements, we there is a new chapter called Energy and Raw Materials. So in the UK, Chile, Mexico, and New Zealand agreements, which goes beyond the standard obligations in the trades and goods chapters. If you want, during the discussion, I can go more into the details. I don't think, so I will not do that now. Because it's quite technical, but as you can see, sustainability is there. For instance, the obligation to have environmental impact assessment for projects in the energy and raw materials field. And also there is a cooperation on value chains or responsible mining practices. Next slide, please. And I have, there is the by now traditional trade and sustainable development chapter, which I guess a lot of you are familiar with. Here I reproduced the main elements of the trade and sustainable development chapter in the Mercosur agreement. This is an agreement in principle announced on, this is based on the agreement in principle announced on the 28th of June 2019. I used to deal with trade and sustainable development in the past before going to the delegation in Ukraine. So I know quite a bit the details. Maybe I will not, I can also go back to the details later on if needed. Just very quickly, so you have, it's all about making sure that trade does not come at the expense of environment and labor conditions. The most important provision of all these chapters is the one that says that parties should not lower labor and environmental standards in order to attract trade and investment. And that applies 100% to mining and raw materials as well. Even if there is a separate chapter on energy and raw materials, the trade and sustainable development chapter, and that particular provision, which is the the toughest one in the chapter applies to raw materials. Next slide, please. So you have references to climate change conventions, environmental, multilateral environmental agreements, and ILO, International Labour Organization conventions. What should I highlight here is that climate change is very important, but also deforestation, sustainable agriculture, and corporate social responsibility or responsible business conduct. The parties also commit to promote these in line with the international guidance, such as that of the OECD or the UN. As far as I know, the next there will be a discussion about that in the panel. Next slide, please. So this goes on. What is quite important to note is that there is a specific dispute settlement for trade and sustainable development, which does not lead to trade sanctions. So you can say that in that sense, this chapter is weaker than the rest of the free trade agreements, and there was a lot of debate about that, whether this is a good thing or not. But what we have is a dedicated civil society consultation mechanism dedicated to that chapter, to the trade and sustainable development chapter, which is supposed to put pressure on the parties to really take it seriously. Next slide, please. So that was the free trade agreements, which are legally binding. When we are also building partnerships that are legally non-binding, based on memorandum of understandings, MOUs. We have 2 concluded with Canada and Ukraine, and more are in the pipeline in the next month. I'm not supposed to reveal any details, but there is a high chance that some Latin American countries will be among the new candidates for these non-binding partnerships. And we have multi-party initiatives like the Mineral Security Partnership, MSP, led by the US, and there is the EU-US Trade and Technology Council, TTC. So these partnerships are about channeling cooperation funds in infrastructure to support economic development, matchmaking activities, promotion of research and development projects, but also promotion of environmental, social, and governance criteria and standards. Next slide, please. We have a new autonomous trade measures, and some are related to economic, the relationship between economy and politics, but some are really about sustainability, concerning deforestation, corporate sustainability, due diligence, the CBAM that I already mentioned, and forced labor. Next slide, please. And finally, here maybe I will spend a bit more time. We have the internal EU action on critical raw materials. There is a package that we are preparing, intended for adoption in the first quarter of 2023. So it will consist of a critical raw materials act, which will cover which will be about the EU, but also there will be communication which will cover the international dimension. It would include providing a shared, so the Critical Raw Materials Act will include providing a shared understanding of which critical raw materials can be considered as particularly strategic. They will improve the EU's monitoring capacity and strengthen Europe's raw materials value chain for mining, refining, processing, and recycling capacities. We aim to identify mineral resources and critical raw materials projects in the EU strategic interest while ensure a high level of environmental protection. And one of the objectives is to strengthen circularity and support research and innovation. And this will be complemented, as I said, by a communication which will also cover the international dimension. And what is the most important for you is that there is already a call for evidence published, and it's still open. So you can all have your views heard until the 25th November on this package. I put the link there. So there is a call for evidence published on this new initiative where you can share your views. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think that was it. So thank you for listening, and I'm ready for discussion or questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot, Daniel, for the very detailed presentation on what's happening at the trade level in the European Union when it comes to raw materials and mineral resources. Now, we are a bit over time with the presentations, but no problem. Let's make this panel debate quite sharp. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of the speakers on the screen. And we can start with the panel discussion, especially Rafael and Anna. We didn't see you yet, so nice to see you with us right now. Of course, from people listening in, if you have any questions, read the presentations of Claudia and Daniel, please put them in the Q&A and we will go back to them later on. For now, Anna, I would like to start from you, going a little bit into the realm of visions for mining in Latin America. You have been exploring several of them in some of your previous works, making a jump back, 1980s, 1990s, Chile, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, huge wave of liberalization, right? So the main goal was to attract foreign direct investments and to protect them. So there was huge access to licensing, to resources, and basically a market liberalization. Now, with the time going on, they were more and more clear some of the pitfalls of this approach in terms of environmental and social responsibility, for instance, and consequences, not only for local communities, but also for the way in which these mechanisms were then being translated into an economic paradigm. Right now, of course, there are still, Claudia brought in the vision from Chile. Of course, there are lots of differences among Latin American countries as well as similarities. Could you provide us a little bit with a context of what is or what are the prevailing visions at this point in time for mining, whether maybe we are able to come up with a sort of an umbrella under which mining is entering the discussion? And what do you see these prevailing visions leading to in the field of responsible sourcing?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. And well, I had really enjoyed the presentations before that had preceded the discussion. So yes, we can see a change. So we have, if we look at what has happened, the trends in mining policy in Latin America over in historical terms, there have been cycles but we can see also a change of approach, general change of approach, and the role of mining in economies. So yeah, definitely, as you said, that role of mining as a source of source of income, of exports, that export role has changed over time, and it is more widely understood that it needs to have a role in industries as a platform for other industries, as a catalyst of industrialization of industries, of productive capacities. So with more links into research, science, and innovation system. So we can also see across the region the uptake, of course, through constitutional reforms and legislation and development of legislation of environmental rights, human rights, and a general that has happened is a trend that started in the 90s, of course, the ratification of international instruments that also weave relationships with the world. But over time, it is becoming clearer that all these issues interconnect. And I think at the presentation by Daniel on how trade agreements that were completely disconnected from the ratified international environmental or human rights treaties and instruments. So how they are, we are getting into another phase. One, mining having a role as a catalyst to other industries and a role in science, research, and innovation that needs to be integrated. There is a need to generate knowledge for better operations. And on the other hand, the interconnection of the economic instruments, investment, trade, with environmental human rights instruments. So I think that is, so I would say that is definitely a change in the overall governance of the sector in the region. Of course, trends always happen in different ways that are, so but there are certain aspects that can be more focused, or some countries can focus on certain aspects, but than others. Trends can be clearer than in some places on some aspects. But I would say that are definitely overall trends on that regard in terms of overall changes. So that's why I have suggested that. Well, that is, I go to my book, that I have suggested that we need to understand so these aspects of the governance that were, until not too long ago, they were fragmented and disconnected. On one hand, national legislation, and actually mining has usually been seen as a matter of domestic law, as an industry subject to domestic legislation, and that is a fact. But actually, we can see better the interconnections with other frameworks and with other actors. So that is why thinking of governance, of an overarching governance frameworks that aim at certain goals as SDGs, or certain agreed common goals, but there are blocks in that architecture that is national legislation, international law, policy, and cooperation, regional frameworks, and transnational standards and transnational legislation. I would say that responsible sourcing, it is there. So it is in transnational legislation. So the question is how we connect, so how we work further at this, how we get into the phase of connecting this further, but understanding the complexity of the overall framework. And as Claudia was saying, so how we interact with the challenge of responsible sourcing, but with an excellent understanding of the challenges and the needs in context. So sometimes that would be, I would stop here, but sometimes the debates on responsible sourcing so focus on market needs or market demands, And sometimes there is a so that that aspect of what happens nationally with the national frameworks, what are the constitutional provisions, what are resources in these countries, and what are the resources for the sites, for peoples at the site of extraction, sometimes that aspect is lost. So that's why I always getting back, I think it is helpful to get back to the understanding that all these aspects are interconnected, and that the region is also has also worked over time on frameworks that are more interconnected. Probably we need, of course, we're in the phase of understanding these interconnections further.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Rodana. And actually, we're going to go back later on some of these aspects related to the interface between markets and institutions, which you mentioned just now. But you also acted as a very good bridge between what Daniel was saying before and what I want to involve Rafael now with. Rafael, you have had decades of experience as an executive at very high level with Vale, and also now at Proactiva Results, you're working, consulting international organizations, working in the sector on topics related to the responsible sourcing. We heard just from Daniel, also quickly, how many requirements, how many different policies and related to due diligence, to environment, to social conditions are being embedded in European policies. Now, looking from a market perspective, from an industry perspective, also looking at your own experience in the past, what is the effect that these regulations, these type of agreements have on companies in Latin America? That's one question. Maybe to spice it up a little bit, do you think that all these regulations and requirements are actually conducive towards better business for these companies in terms of, simply speaking now, in terms of money, business generation, right? I don't want to go into the most important topic of environmental and social outcomes, which of course is the goal of this type of requirements. But just looking at a business environment perspective, are these requirements facilitating trade between Europe and Latin America, or actually hindering that because it's a weight, it's a burden for companies?
That's a good point, Manuel. I think first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm pleased to be with these bright colleagues on this panel, and congratulations for the overall initiative that resourcing is taking this week with all these panels and events. So I think the answer to your question is yes, it is conducive to better performance. The question is to what extent and how deep, is it sufficient or not? So I think if we take the late 2000s, when we started with the discussions about critical raw materials and where we are at now, I think we saw a huge development in terms of the level of maturity of all stakeholders around what better performance in social environmental aspects means, right? So if we take late 2000s, that was pre-EU Green Deal. It was also not as clear as it is today what was needed. Today, we are in an era where ESG is present. This is post-developments of PRI, of UNEP-FI, of UN Guiding Principles of Business and Human Rights. We are in a completely different framework of guidance and references with several other ESG frameworks explaining what is criticality, what is materiality, double materiality, triple materiality in this analysis. So we are in a different world now, right? But I think front and center, going back to what Claudia was saying, is what are we talking about here? And are these instruments and the way we are using them listening to Daniel and the various approaches and tools that we have internationally, the same highlights that Anna brought, and then the specificities of tools that Claudia brought. Are these at the right level, right? And when I look at the scope of our panel here, in search of a common agenda, aligning EU and Latin America visions for sustainability and responsible sourcing of minerals, what common agenda? What common agenda are we talking about? Do I have my set of tools and sometimes I use these tools to poke your eyes? Or are we really talking about strategic levers, strategic leverage of what we need to face what we have ahead of us? So we are talking about critical materials now with a level of clarity around energy transition, around going towards the new economy, batteries, solar panels, alternative energies, all the needs that these materials will have to respond to, with already known exponential growth in demand. This is what Claudia brought as a starting point. So if this exponential growth is what we're talking about, where are these minerals coming from? So for me, the discussion we're having here is sort of all of us seeing a train coming against us, and we're talking about traffic lights and how old or how qualified is the chauffeur of this train, and if we have or not electronic systems, and the train is in the verge of hitting us on our faces, right? I've lived, and all the panelists here lived, the mineral super cycle. A super cycle is not a friend of sustainability. When we develop mining projects in a hurry, in a crisis, we have impact. We expose human rights to risks. We expose people to violations. We have more impact on the environment because we're not planning properly, because we're not taking the adequate time. How do I do free prior informed consent if I have to deliver in 6 months 4 times more lithium than I would have, right? It doesn't exist. So if we're talking about a common agenda here, it's better we really beef up our discussion to the strategic level. I don't see between the European Union and the Mercosur or South America and Latin America, how do we really talk about what will be the necessary demand of Europe? What will be the necessary supply going out of Latin America? And how we match these two in a sustainable way, right? It is very easy for us to put penalties and restraints and dispute settlement mechanisms when the problems are already happening. By the time they hit international level dispute settlement, the glass is already broken, right? This is the tip of the iceberg. So, and here I wrap my comment. If we're talking about a common agenda, it's better we talk about sustainable development in a responsible way. We know what's ahead of us. We know the challenge of transition we have. We know where the supply comes from. How are we going to talk about it? How are we going to talk about sustainable finance, about sustainable development, about the necessary pace of development of this kind of output for the necessary input we need in the new economy? This is a responsible approach, right? So I don't think we are all the way there yet. I think actually we are very far. And on the other hand, the train is very near. So it's very concerning. We better expedite our talks towards how sustainability and responsible sourcing can occur. I think the changes we're seeing in government in Brazil are conducive. Speaking about conducive measures, I think they are conducive. I think they will reignite a lot of the discussions around Mercosur EU discussions. And I hope this segment of that umbrella and other fora we have for these discussions will reach on a strategic level so that we can really tackle that the adequate way and proportional way. So going back to your question, a very new one, the tools we have, are they conducive? Yes. Are they at the level we need? No. So we have tools, we have indicators, we have measures, but they are not being applied at the strategic level we need to make the difference we need for what this scope here that we are being provoked is asking us.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Rafael. And actually, thanks for spicing up again a bit more the conversation. I will take this directly to Daniel. Talking about this strategic level, right? In your presentation, we saw lots of requirements of good intentions from the European level. On the other end, also internally in Europe, there are some commentators saying that in trade and financial policy, Europe is a little bit looking too much inwards. And these are also words coming from the former president of the European Commission, Martin Schulz, where, for instance, looking at the Green Deal, some commentators are arguing that it should have been a tool more for opening up, for actually finding the strategic alignment with partners around the world rather than just looking at internal requirements. So my question to you, Daniel, would be in terms of strategy for actually, of course, in the case of Latin America right now, beyond, let's say, going beyond these requirements, what's in there? So in terms of thinking in terms of joint investments, thinking in terms of really having a plan, as Rafael mentioned, of sustainable development and supply and demand, which might satisfy the needs of both parties on the table. Is there a discussion going on in this level in the European Union? And if so, what are the elements? It's about investments, it's about transferring skills, it's about opening up new platforms for a more frontal conversation. What's going on?
Very good questions. So we don't like to put it like that, but we, the EU, but the Americans do. It's about China. It's about us versus China. We do not like to put it like that, but we see the need to differentiate ourselves, the EU, from Chinese investments in the field. And what we see is our biggest value added is that in Europe we have sustainability in our instincts. European consumers expect from our investors to have a sustainable approach in Latin America. We want that to be a win-win, and that is, we think, on the long term, what will work with Latin America. This is about all aspects of sustainability, not just labor and environment and climate change, but also about value added to the local and contribution to the local economy. And that is, we are really sincere about that, even if this situation now that we are facing with the Russian invasion is brings out the, this survival instincts sometimes, and there is some short-termism maybe sometimes, but I think things will settle down, and we will see that it has to be a win-win for Latin America and the EU, and we have to make sure that these investments in critical raw materials that I hope will materialize, have to be in the long-term interest in both parties, and will be really sustainable, and not just greenwashing, but really sustainable, and really bring value added to Latin America and Europe alike. And I think that that's where we can differentiate ourselves from Chinese investors, let's say.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot, Daniel. And I really appreciate your honesty as well in putting the name there, because of course, looking at data right now, also in terms of just, again, monetary terms, so the deals being made, the portion of Chinese deals in lithium, for instance, is going over any other country. And that's, of course, something which is changing quite drastically the landscape around not only investments, but also, of course, how do these investments translate into requirements or outcomes for social and environmental responsibility. I would just like to mention that there are only 20 minutes left, so there are still lots of questions on the way. So I would just ask every of the speakers to be as sharp as possible in your opinions. I will take this to Claudia now. Claudia, from a Chilean perspective, I read one survey yesterday made from a German foundation, which was asking Latin American citizens in different Latin American countries a set of questions about, for instance, preferred partners in trade or in different dimensions. And it came out that Europe was the preferred partner in terms of values being shared among the two continents. My question to you is, from a Chilean perspective, and also taking into account what Daniel said of Europe trying to differentiate from the investments and strategy of China, do you actually perceive that? Do you think that having agreements with Europe rather than China on some specific areas, of course, it's not that one or the other, but do you think that having agreements and a stronger relationship with Europe in this area is conducive to responsible sourcing, looking at all the aspects which are in Chile? So thinking about, of course, indigenous populations, environment, social sustainability. Do you have this perception? Do you think that's the case, or you don't really feel this difference between different partners?
I think from the consumer perspective, as well as in Europe, people is more aware and is looking at those issues. And for us, it really matters how and who is developing, is producing resources, and with whom we are trading. And from the perspective of Chile in particular, and I think from many countries in Latin America, Europe, as I mentioned in our previous meeting, is always have seen as a force of good in terms of democracy, and has a nice element. For another part, we have a difficult situation for many dictatorships in Latin America, and there's problems with other neighbors as well in the north. So we are not looking in the same way Europe. Europe is the force of good democracy. So I think one of the role that the European Union can play in this regard, as Anna mentioned, and also Rafael, when he said that if we need to produce an amount of material, we just violate human rights probably, because the business look at money. And I said we have to work in a common platform and common understanding, and with this sustainability things which the common people are pressing in Europe and here as well. So I think this will be a very good thing, and people really appreciate trading with the European Union.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Claudia. And I think this, of course, apart from the let's say pleasure they may bring to Europeans during these words, it's also raising up the responsibility bar in really following up on these expectations. Going to Anna now, we mentioned before this multi-level situation, right? Going from institutions, they go from local to regional to national to transnational, and of course markets playing the rules set by these institutions as well. as Rafael mentioned as well before, and also just Claudia now, we need new platforms for talking to each other, fundamentally, for talking to each other and for realizing how collaboration in the true sense of the word can be taken to the next level to ensure that supply security goes hand in hand with environmental and social sustainability. We often listen to this word of collaboration across value chains. I must be honest, sometimes it seems like it's losing a bit of meaning because it's so much repeated everywhere that it's not clear what it means anymore. From your perspective, really maybe talking quite concretely, what kind of collaboration do we really need if we're talking about, for instance, public-private partnerships? And where do you see the highest value in setting up these platforms for enabling this dialogue, looking at the future?
Right. Yes, thank you. Actually, I am curious about the MOUs, about partnerships that Daniel mentioned. And so I was curious to see they are aligned with this idea of and as a framework for this type of collaboration to very concrete actions, as you say, because there are, I think it's very important to open up the discussion, and as Rafael suggested, to put on the table all the problems, so to understand the problems and the problems that are now exacerbated with the demand, and then we need to understand also that this is occurring in context that in many cases suffer from institutional weaknesses. So to deal with the environmental and social aspects of development. So I think that it is important then that these platforms for collaboration have specific goals and that can be commonly agreed around the value chain. For example, increase scientific knowledge about baselines, environmental baselines, and about, for example, in the case of lithium, there is a lot of discussion and understanding. There is a need of understanding the hydrology of salars that is very complex, of salt lakes. And that is extremely expensive. So how you spur common action towards these goals that are, that probably before, until not too long ago, they were seen as matters of just concern, national concern. But there is an evolving understanding that these are matters of concern for global citizens. So because there is a global goal of decarbonization, global goal of biodiversity or biodiversity protection, that extraction or development of these sites occur within the carrying capacity of ecosystems. So I think if we agree on common goals and the action that can steer action of all the different nodes or actors in value chains to contribute to that common goal. So I think as a speaker in the previous session said that, so he said that he would like to see more of global values, value chain as values rather than a market instrument. And I would see it in that way. So to see if it can evolve towards a very clear understanding of common goals and how all that, and that relates to the issue of how the action of different actors connect and collaborate towards these common goals, towards achieving common goals.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Anna. So there are just 10 minutes to go, and there are still few rounds I would like to make in 10 minutes. There is one question for Daniel in the chat, but first I go to Rafael. Rafael, before you made quite a systemic comment, which then spurred a quite interesting discussion, I would want to bring you back to the very crude dimension of money. We often think about, let's first align visions and then make make investments based on those visions. Can it be the case, given the current landscape, where there are more and more sustainability requirements put into financial decisions, that actually finance, so certain joint investments, for instance, between Latin American and European countries, can lead to responsible sourcing? Is this one possibility? And if yes, what do we need to see more to make this happen?
Emmanuel, I think ESG responsible investment is already making a change. Right, we, as practitioners here in the last 3 years, we've seen an explosion of clients coming to us and asking for our support because they went through due diligence requested by a financial institution, and they had their financing suspended because they hadn't matched certain criteria requested by ESG, by an IFC performance standard or something like that. So I think in that sense and at that level, the ESG responsible investment is transformative, right? And I think this is one of the elements, along with certifications, along with new regulations, nationally speaking, new regulations in the market of destination. So when we see the proposal of an EU directive on corporate responsibility, looking at supply chains and how my clients behave vis-a-vis not what I deliver, but how I produce that product I am delivering. So that is a huge change, and it is happening, right? And this big splash I did in my earlier participation here, I didn't want just to throw the baby with the cold water. I think all of us here are bringing very important components that need to be used in a strategic way. And I think the last speech by Anna was very inspiring. How do we set concrete goals with all the wealth of knowledge we have around what is already on the table and what we have ahead of us, right? So, of course, there are issues with some of our Asian partners, as we heard earlier, but Asian economies have also been an interesting inspiration in terms of how we should plan long-term, right? And we could get the Japanese, for instance, as an example on how they treat supply, right? So we should think of a very strategic approach at the strategic partnership level on how to move this with the mobilization of countries involved in their national plan and the bi-regional plan, if we're talking about EU and Latin America. This is the only way we're going really to treat that in scale and at the level that the challenge is posing us, right? So I think this is really important. I think bottom up, we are seeing a lot of move through this tangibility and very concrete aspects through financing, ESG responsible finance, but top down, this organization of the big supply chains and demands through countries, through strategic partnerships, so that these visions are aligned, are going to bring scale to what is going to happen with this spike we are having and still have in the near future. It is very important that we support market forces in that regard. Market forces alone, when we look at past experiences in super cycle, won't be able to really develop the outputs necessary to that demand with tools at tactical level, at the private level. We need public guidance aligning with a multi-stakeholder approach to reach something that is more conducive for sustainable and responsible sourcing of minerals.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Rafael. So 5 minutes to go. Let's try to have just a short round, conclusive one each. Daniel, the question that came for you through the chat was basically related to the critical raw materials package. So Alejandro asked whether you could explain, of course, at this stage, quite shortly, maybe then there is the way to go more in depth. Explain a bit more what does this communication covering the international dimension is about, basically. So what kind of non-regulatory initiatives will be covered, and if also the call for evidence is an opportunity to provide feedback or inputs for such communication as well.
Yeah, so the package will consist of at least two elements. One is the Critical Raw Materials Act, which will be about EU internal issues, internal market, about how to support mining and recycling within the EU and all, but not just mining, but all the stages of the supply chain. This will be the legally binding part. So this is the core of the package, but it will be accompanied by a communication. This communication will be about the international aspects. We are in the process. So and that's why it's very important that if you have views, you let us know in the call for evidence, because we are really, honestly, we don't know. We have ideas what to put in, but we need your views, because we want to put there things that are really useful, that really where the EU can have real value added, and not just recycle stuff that we are already doing, or invent new measures that will not help at all. We are in the phase, we are having on the top of the call for evidence meetings with some stakeholders, some important stakeholders, with lobby groups, with our delegations. There is an active discussion ongoing with Latin American EU delegations. There is actually a mission, what we call a mission, but I think it's not nice. It's EU jargon. A trip to Chile and Argentina of DG Grow, big bosses, to have a discussion with local stakeholders. We don't know yet what we will put in there. We want to go beyond what I just explained. What I just explained was about these traditional trade tools like free trade agreements, like MOUs, like TDI, trade defense instruments, and stuff like that. We want to address a bit the financing part also, and the investment, how to ease EU investment in Latin America, and all that with the intention to make it as sustainable as possible.
Perfect.
And to make it a win-win. So in short, the answer is we don't know yet, and that's why you have to let us know your views.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Daniel. We're actually 1 minute before finishing, but I still want, if possible, Ursula, to have one final sentence each without creating any disturbance to the overall conference. I will be very quick. So just one sentence each for Claudia, Rafael, and Anna. Anna, starting from you, in building these platforms, how do we make sure for dialogue? How do we make sure that everybody is heard, including also artisanal and small-scale mining? Just one sentence.
Yes, yes, I would say that mindsets of collaboration, because so from mindsets of competition to mindsets of collaboration is key, and involvement of local stakeholders. In many cases, also local universities at the site. So at territorial level, it's important they have important voice to be heard in these platforms.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Anna. Claudia, we often face this discussion from a linear perspective, right? Take, make, use. You mentioned circular economy quite a lot. Can the circular economy be a way to actually achieve more integration and collaboration for responsible sourcing? Again, just one sentence, please.
Yeah, circular economy together with other perspectives such as the life cycle assessment and EPD tools, I think.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Rafael, for you, just a yes or no, because I know that you have lots of ideas to share. So I have to bind you to a yes or no answer. The train is coming fast. You mentioned there is lots of things to do. The time is not much. Can we make it or not?
Yes, we can. It sounds like Obama, but I think we know what we need. We have this transition ahead of us. The key question is, what is the role of mining at the strategic level? What's the plan for that? We don't have a plan at strategic level. We need that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then let's indeed work on creating this plan together. I wish to thank you all for being excellent speakers and panelists of today. It's been a very engaging session for me. I'm sure also for all the people listening in. And now with 1 minute delay, Ursula, I give it back to you. And thanks a lot, everybody, for listening in.
Thank you so much, Francesco. Thank you very much, everybody who was talking now. This was really interesting and so much information and inputs in a short time and then on time. It's just excellent.